This has been Dragon Age, Tevinter Nights. The Wigmaker Job. Written by Courtney Woods. And read by Kyle Bond. In a cold, dark room beneath the streets of Verantium, Ambrose Forfex prepared for the wig show of the season. Using a thimble as a gauge for thickness, he measured out a lock of hair. His slender fingers brushed through the strands. The silky texture made him tremble. There were no imperfections, no split ends, no breakage. Only hair, lush and velvety, in its purest form. A throaty sigh escaped the wigmaker's lips. Flawless! The approaching pitter-patter of footsteps interrupted the moment. His moment. Two hooded figures stopped at the entrance of the wigmaker's workshop. They didn't dare enter. "Ambrose, we need to talk," one of them said.
"Your footsteps sound like dead fish slapping against cobblestone,"
Ambrose sniffed. "Upstairs," the other replied. Ambrose let the tresses slip ever so delicately through his fingertips.
"I'll return soon,"
he murmured, then followed the pair up the staircase to the main living quarters. Only when they were safely in the sitting room with the curtains drawn did the figures lower their hoods. They were both Altus, the highest class of mage in the Tevinter Imperium. "You need to cancel the event," Crispin Cavalo stated. His father was a magister, and he had grand plans to follow in his footsteps.
"Need?"
Ambrose mocked.
"How dramatic."
"This is serious," Felicia Aramon said. Her brother Livius had introduced Ambrose to the Venatori, opened his eyes to a future where the Imperium could once again be great. "Someone's put a contract on your head, just like the others. The Crows are coming." She whispered the last part as if those words alone could summon the infamous assassins. Ambrose stifled a groan.
"The dragon does not fear the crow."
"It does when it's already killed 8 other dragons," Crispin snapped. He had begun to sweat. His eyes darted toward the closed doors and windows like a caged animal's.
"Look at you, quivering over Antivan propaganda."
Ambrose leveled the man with his unimpressed glare.
"This is why the Imperium is in shambles."
Without warning, the wigmaker grabbed Crispin's arm. The younger mage winced and tried to pull away as Ambrose dug a pointed thumbnail into his forearm. Blood, crimson and thick, seeped from underneath the nail.
"Crows are flesh and blood, nothing more."
He muttered a quick spell to close the wound.
"The show will go on."
Crispin jerked back and held his freshly healed arm against his chest. Ambrose crossed the room to a small but well-stocked bar. All this talk of Antiva was making him thirsty. "The man who's taken the contract is no ordinary crow," Felicia explained, careful to keep her voice steady. Ambrose uncorked the wine with a wave of his hand and began pouring it into a crystal decanter. "He's Lucanis Dellamorte." The bottle clanged against the crystal. A crack splintered down the glass. "Ah." Goosebumps pebbled the wigmaker's neck. He set the decanter back on the counter and sighed.
"Shit."
In an unassuming inn on an unassuming road, Lucanis Dellamorte sat with a whetstone in hand, his favorite sword resting across his knee. The monotonous movement of grinding stone against metal soothed him. 7 daggers of various size and shape lay polished and glistening on the rough wool blanket at his feet. Music, mixed with laughter and gossip, choked through the floorboards. Lucanis closed his eyes. His mind separated the sounds until they painted a picture. A waitress rushed from the kitchen. 2 lovers took advantage of a shadowy booth, their lips smacked together, wet and wanton. a man cheated at wicked grace. The card up his sleeve strained against the starched fabric of his shirt. None is a threat. He relaxed. "You're not wearing that, are you?" Illario asked, while admiring his own reflection. Lucanis glanced down at his ensemble. The jet leather greatcoat and black-on-black suit might have been conspicuous during the day, but for a night job it was the tactical choice. He compared his outfit to his cousin's high-collared navy and gold tunic. It was something an Antivan thought a Vint would wear. "At least I don't look like a tourist," he replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Illario spritzed his hair with oil and slicked it back with both hands. "No, you look like you're attending a funeral." "Very funny," Lucanis said flatly, and returned to sharpening his blade. "It's a job, not a party. Actually, it's a job at a party. Might as well look our best." Illario flicked open a straight razor to trim an errant follicle of stubble that was ruining his otherwise pristine 5 o'clock shadow. "Any excuse to primp." "Hey, I'm only here because of you," Illario grumbled. "We should be halfway home right now. Only the great Lucanis Dellamorte could delay a summons from the First Talon herself." Lucanis set his sword aside. Illario was generally thick-skinned, except when it came to their grandmother. "Katarina can hardly complain. She's the one who beat into me my commitments to contracts." Memories of sweat-filled days without food or water came unbidden. Lucanis's back tingled from where his grandmother's cane had bruised his flesh for letting his guard down or fumbling his footwork. For years he'd hated her, but his time as a master assassin had since taught Lucanis that Katarina's cruelty was her way of making sure that he was prepared for this life, that he survived. "All that effort training and grooming us, and the old woman still won't step aside." Beneath the bitterness in Illario's tone was something rotten. "Your time will come," Lucanis assured him. "Will it?" Illario's piercing gaze met Lucanis in the mirror. "People talk. You've always been her favorite." He'd heard the rumors. For all their secrets and intrigue, the Antivan Crows were a chatty bunch. "My talents lie elsewhere," Lucanis said, gesturing toward the arsenal around him. "You're the one with the silver tongue." "So if she named you heir to House Dellamorte, you'd refuse?" Lucanis opened his mouth to respond when he realized someone was creeping up the stairs. He listened. The footsteps were too quiet, too sure to belong to a drunk. A servant? Doubtful. When he'd bought out the floor, Lucanis had given the innkeeper explicit instructions to keep her people downstairs. That left the Venatori, unless someone else on his long list of enemies had found him. "Lucanis!" Illario pressed. He held up a hand and clutched the worn leather grip of his sword. Illario's pretty boy mask slipped as a coldness flooded his features. A retractable dagger shot out from under his sleeve. The intruder was at the top of the stairs and moving closer. Lucanis motioned Illario to start talking again. "This isn't cacio e pepe," Illario complained, while making a show of tapping his dagger against a plate of leftovers. "You ordered an Antivan dish in Tevinter. What did you expect?" Lucanis replied. Talking now meant the intruder wouldn't know where he'd be later. "Something edible," Illario quipped. In 3 quick, silent strides, Lucanis positioned himself next to the suite's entrance. He could hear someone breathing on the other side. Their gloved fingers hugged the wall for cover. Lucanis could have laughed. People put too much faith in walls. Rearing back, he thrust his sword through the wood and plaster, until it hit bone, and kept going. A shriek echoed through the hall, followed by a thud. Lucanis stood and stalked through the door. A hooded man, wiry and mustached, was trying to pull his impaled hand free. A mage's staff lay next to him, Upon seeing Lucanis, he reached for it. Energy, raw and potent, charged the air. The back of Lucanis's eyeballs itched, a physical instinct he had developed when someone was tapping into the Fade. He clapped a hand over the mage's mouth and slammed his skull against the wall. "Knock it off." Dazed, the mage dropped his staff. The energy dissipated. Lucanis grabbed the man by the collar and yanked him toward the door, causing the blade to carve an L-shaped slice through his skewered palm. Illario waited with a chair and rope. "Sit down," he beamed. "Enjoy a little Antivan hospitality." While his cousins secured their prisoner's bindings, Lucanis retrieved his sword from the wall. The mage was coming too. His unfocused eyes took stock of the situation. "I won't talk," he spat, "even if you torture me." "I'm too busy to torture you," Lucanis said, and ran him through with his sword. Shock swept across the mage's gaunt face. Beneath a trembling mustache, his lips were wet with blood. He tried to speak, but the words got clogged in his throat. He slumped forward. Illario frowned. "If I'd have known you were just going to kill him, I wouldn't have put so much effort into the nuts." "Check his pockets." "Ah," Illario said, pulling a scroll from the mage's jacket. "Found something." The seal was broken, but the imprint of 2 dragons was still visible in the wax. "Venatori." "Thought as much. What's it say?" Illario unrolled the parchment and scanned the page. "Gallant brothers and sisters, in our veins runs true Tevinter blood passed down from the dreamers." Illario's head snapped up as Lucanis began pulling his sword from the mage's chest. "Careful! Remember the tenor job? You ruined my best shirt." Lucanis smirked and continued extracting the blade. Illario took 2 wary steps back, then continued reading. "The importance of vigilance, it's our maker's given right, blah, blah, blah. Oh, here. The Venatori will not cower to foreign mercenaries." "No, they'll just die to them." The blade slipped cleanly from the wound. "Anything else?" "Whoever clips the crow's wings will walk by my side when we enter the Black City and take back glory for the Imperium." Illario lowered the scroll, perplexed. "Well, that doesn't seem worth it." "That's because you're not a true believer, except when it comes to coin." Illario shrugged, unabashed, then handed Lucanis the scroll. "It's signed A. Seems our Mark doesn't want you crashing his party." Lucanis stuck the scroll on the dead mage's chest. "He's going to be disappointed." Downstairs, the tavern's nightly merriment continued. The crows cut striking figures as they meandered through the tipsy, twirling dancers and sidestepped servants bearing plates of stew and fresh bread. Both men were lean with dark hair and umber eyes. Illario was all smiles. His was a calculated handsomeness. From his smooth skin to his perfect white teeth, everything was contrived to be enticing. As they walked through the crowd, he basked in the appreciative glances he received, while Lucanis stared ahead, focused and intense. He was the kind of man you couldn't look away from, until he looked at you. When the innkeeper spotted them, her ruddy cheeks paled. Lucanis sidled up to the bar and slid 2 sovereigns across the uneven wood. "For the mess," he whispered, watching her throat bobble. The innkeeper dropped the coins into her apron's front pocket with shaky fingers, and avoided his gaze until she was sure he was gone. "You know," Illario said, as they left the inn, "she's likely the one who leaked our whereabouts to the Venatori." Lucanis breathed in the night air. Every city had its scent. Virantium's was spiced with meat mixed with wet laundry. "I'm aware. And you're paying her because..." "Innkeepers like to gossip. to customers, employees, other innkeepers. Next time the Venatori want information on the Antivan Crows, she'll know who to back. And she'll tell her friends. Lucanis started down the street. Illario trailed behind at a casual pace. So what's the plan, now that Ambrose knows we're coming? I always assume the Mark knows I'm coming, Lucanis replied. We were never going through the front door. Illario sped up to catch his cousin. I bought this, he gestured toward his tunic, because you said we were dispatching Tevinter's premier wigmaker at an exclusive party. Emphasis on exclusive. Uh-huh. It was a rush order. We were with the tailor for hours. I recall. Lucanis took a sharp turn down an alley. Above them, balconies jutted out like cramped elbows finding space in a crowd. A cat hissed in the distance. Why let me go through the motions of purchasing formal wear for an event we're not actually attending? I know how much you enjoy dressing up. Lucanis goaded and ducked under a pointed archway. Only if I'm going to be seen, Illario groaned. His boots stepped in something squishy and foul-smelling. And why are we in this dog-shit part of town? Shouldn't a high-ranking member of the Venatori live in a mansion? He does. We are taking a shortcut. The archway led to a courtyard. Patches of brown grass, treaded and uncared for, encircled a statue of a scorched Venedal, an elven tree of the people. The real tree had burned down after a slave rebellion. The masters commissioned the current statue as a reminder of the price for rising against them. Somehow Lucanis didn't think it had the intended effect. A shortcut that leads to a dead end. How novel, Illario muttered, and pulled the collar of his tunic closer to his nose. Lucanis ignored him and approached the tree. The brass skeletal branches produced a layer of patina, and streaks of erosion lined the bark. He ran his fingers across the trunk until he found a groove that gave way, opening a secret passage. Lucanis tossed a smug look over his shoulder. You were saying? Illario rolled his eyes and followed his cousin into the passage, down a winding set of limestone stairs. I wouldn't complain if you filled me in, he grumbled. Yes, you would. As much, Illario conceded. I wouldn't complain as much. The passage was musty with age. The uppermost stairs were 4 stones wide and 4 stones long, but with each step they grew narrower. The middle stones sagged from years of use. Lucanis had almost tripped the first time he ventured down here. The only source of light was from the torches of green veil fire nailed to the brick walls. Flecks of minerals and crushed glass in the brick flickered and winked at them. It's like swirling down a bottle of wine, Illario mumbled, peering over the edge. At the bottom they found an elf in a scarlet coat guarding a large steel door. She greeted Lucanis with a cordial smile. Master Dellamorte, and... Her friendly facade faltered as she spotted Illario. Master Dellamorte, and... Her friendly facade faltered as she spotted Illario. Master Dellamorte, the lesser, Illario offered with a grin. My cousin, Lucanis clarified. Appeased, the elf asked, Where does your business take you to tonight? Up. She nodded. Lucanis planted his feet firmly on the ground. The elf clapped her hands together, snuffing out the veil fire. The room began to spin, gently at first, then faster. Lucanis bit back a laugh as Illario held out an arm to steady himself. A few seconds later, the room slowed to a stop, and the veil fire burned once more. The elf opened the door to reveal another spiral staircase. Oh, good. More stairs, Illario deadpanned. Lucanis bowed his head in thanks and slipped a sovereign into the elf's gloved palm. Happy hunting, she whispered as they passed, then shut the door behind them. You've made friends, Illario remarked as they began the climb. "You would too, if you ever left Treviso."
"I'm here now, aren't I?"
he argued.
"Seriously, though, what is this place?"
"A perk, given by our mysterious benefactor." Lucanis quickened his pace, hoping to leave the answer at that. Illario did not take the hint.
"Speaking of, I have some questions about him. Her? Them?"
"I'm sure you do."
"Oh, come on,"
Illario urged, matching Lucanis's pace.
"When have we ever taken on an anonymous client?"
"Since someone could put tangible stock in the phrase, 'silence is golden.'"
"You're not the least bit curious?"
Lucanis exhaled through his nose. "If someone wants to pay me top coin to kill a bunch of racist blood mages, oh, I have it coming. I'm not going to complain."
"Well, when you put it that way."
At the top of the stairs was an empty platform, with no windows or doors. A blanket of moss carpeted the floor. Illario let out a disappointed huff.
"That's anticlimactic."
"Just wait," Lucanis promised. He approached the far wall and began tapping the bricks until he found a hollow one. When he pushed against it, the mortar turned languid and flexible, allowing the bricks to peel back like skin. "Well?" Lucanis asked. Illario tilted his head.
"Better."
Stars and a warm breeze greeted them on the other side. As they stepped off the platform, the bricks locked back in place. They were several stories above ground on the third arched tier of Verantium's famed floating aqueduct.
"The Wigmaker's estate is a short walk that way,"
Lucanis explained, pointing to their left. "One jump, and we'll have access to his roof."
"Devious."
The crows strolled across the covered channel, listening to the steady stream of water flowing beneath their feet. Farther below was a chorus of street traffic. Minrathis was Tevinter's capital, but Veilrantium was her sharp-dressed sister. Amid the sea of brightly colored tunics, stiletto heels clicked against the cobblestone. Necks, both fat and thin, held up heavy, ornate headpieces with trailing gold-embroidered veils. Music from lyres and lutes wrestled for dominance as hawkers touted the latest fashions. Apparently, Velveteen was in. Lucanis peeked over the side. No one looked up. One of the world's greatest wonders is mundane to these people.
"How do they get it to float?"
Illario asked, tapping his boot tip against the aqueduct. "Magic." Lucanis scoured the rooftops, searching for one made of a distinctive red clay. They were still a few buildings away.
"So, the Wigmaker."
Illario wiggled his fingers ominously.
"Tell me about him."
"He's weird," Lucanis replied bluntly. He found the moments before a job crucial for focus, but Illario was never one for comfortable silence.
"Specifics, cousin. No one hires us to kill normal people."
"I gave you a dossier."
"Yes, but I want your assessment."
"I who wrote it. It is my assessment."
"Humor me."
The red clay roof was in sight now. "You'll see soon enough." With a feline grace, Lucanis leapt off the side of the aqueduct. If they had been paying attention, the line of people wrapped around the Wigmaker's estate would have seen the two shadows pass overhead. But their focus was on the stern-faced doormen guarding the entrance. Having your name on the guest list wasn't enough to make it inside one of Ambrose's parties. Your outfit had to impress as well. Both crows landed on the roof with a soft thud. Clay tiles weren't ideal for stealth. Their round shape offered little traction for their boots, and if one tile slipped, others would follow, like a line of loyal soldiers. But at least Illario was too busy concentrating to ask questions. The front of the Wigmaker's estate was a collection of domed rotundas, encased in zigzagging red and beige brick. Guests weren't allowed inside the mansion itself. They were led directly to a grand circular courtyard, surrounded by a two-tiered arcade, at the back of the house. Moving in tandem, Lucanis and Illario dropped to their chests and shimmied to the edge overlooking the courtyard. Tevinter parties, especially thrown by the Altus, were known for their excess. Lucanis still remembered the first gala he had attended in Minrathis. Rows and rows of tables had been overladen with jugs of wine and platters of food from all over Thedas. Retching vases were placed in corners for guests to relieve themselves if they overindulged. Prized slaves were brought out to perform. Acrobats tumbled overhead, musicians played until their fingers blistered. While hunting his mark, Lucanis had opened the wrong door and walked into an orgy. Getting out of that had been interesting. The Wigmaker's Periwig show contained all this and more. A catwalk had been constructed at the center of the courtyard. Running down both sides were grooves for wine to flow from two dragon-shaped spouting fountains. The guests leaned over from plush chase lounges to refill their cups in the streams. They poured wine into each other's mouths and over their bodies, ruining the chic costumes that had been their ticket inside. On the runway, models walked, naked and dead-eyed. Floor-length hair hung over their sagging shoulders, and gaunt hip bones. With each stride, their wigs transformed into miraculous, towering creations. On one, the hair twisted and curled to take the shape of a tree, with a bird dancing to attract a mate. Another portrayed a nest of vipers, their striped, sinuous bodies writhing against each other. As the wigs came alive, the models' blank faces altered to flash manic smiles. But Lucanis noticed their eyes remained lifeless. His skull felt raw. The backs of his eyeballs itched like he hadn't blinked in days. Whatever magic Ambrose was using for his creations was tearing at the seams of the veil. Something's wrong. Yeah, Illario agreed, zeroing in on a group of half-dressed revelers. We're up here, away from the fun. Lucanis snapped his fingers in front of his cousin's face. Focus! I am on the job. To be fair, you never told me the plan. Lucanis shrugged. Find Ambrose, slit his throat. Oh, sounds complicated. It will be. The veil's thin here, thinner than I expected. He rubbed the stubble on his chin. One wrong spell, and this place will be swarming with demons. Then let's kill the bastard and scram. I want to see what this city has to offer. Our ship sails at dawn. Illario waved a dismissive hand. Plenty of time for some good, old-fashioned debauch. I see him. Lucanis interrupted. In the arcade above the catwalk, a man flanked by guards watched the emaciated models from the shadows. Ambrose Forfex was of average height and build, with hawkish gold eyes and a jaw that could break teeth. His scalp and cheekbones were both clean-shaven, leaving his face bare, except for the two black sculpted brows. They're never what you envision, are they? Illario noted. What did you expect? Hair, for one. Maybe a funny little dog? That got a chuckle out of Lucanis, if only briefly. The way the Wigmaker stared at his creations was unnerving. Illario was right. A mark's physical appearance was unpredictable. But the gleam in their eyes, the appetite to do something unspeakable, that was always the same. A woman rushed toward Ambrose's retinue. She wore an emerald gown, with a high-waisted, low-tiered skirt and a fitted tulle bodice, studded with champagne-colored crystals. Metallic body paint shimmered on her exposed arms and legs. Something about the woman's movements and stature were familiar, but Lucanis couldn't place her. Well, hello, Illario purred. Who is this lovely Fiora? After whispering something in Ambrose's ear that made him scowl, the woman motioned the guards to take the Wigmaker to the main house. Suddenly, Lucanis knew exactly who she was. Guard Captain Camille Spina. Illario whistled softly. This job is looking better all the time. Once Ambrose was safely inside, Camille slipped a keyring from the silk brocade layers of her skirt and secured the door. Lucanis frowned. I need those keys. Your wish is my command, cousin, Illario said, and flipped forward in one fluid motion. Following closely from the roof, Lucanis watched Illario sling through the crowd like a fox in the henhouse. Despite his earlier jab, Lucanis had to admit, if only to himself, that his cousin looked at home among the local gentry. Illario winked at strangers as if they'd known each other for years, and the Vints were either too drunk or thought him too attractive to question his familiarity. Meanwhile, Camille made a valiant attempt to appear natural, while sweeping the perimeter. But the instinctive nods to her fellow guards gave her away. Illario waited until she broke for refreshment to make his move. Camille had taken a sip of watered-down Mulsum, when a handsome stranger grabbed her glass and downed the rest. "Excuse me?" she exclaimed. The party drowned out her words, but Lucanis could still read her lips. "That's my drink!" Illario simply smiled. "Guess I'll have to buy you another." Lucanis groaned, not only at the line, but that it worked. Even from his position, he could see Camille was hooked. He shouldn't be surprised. This was old hat for Illario, but it was always amazing to see what one man's smile could accomplish. Camille blushed and leaned toward Illario. Seizing on the opening, he reached around to wave down a passing waiter and lifted the keyring hidden in her dress. When the waiter presented the couple with a tray of drinks, Illario discreetly swapped the keys for 2 glasses of Musum. The waiter sped away, both he and Camille none the wiser. Keeping low, Lucanis jumped to his feet and followed the tray. He needed to swipe the keys before the waiter reached the kitchen, which, judging from the speed of his steps, the man was keen to do. "Couldn't have just held on to them, could you, cousin?" Lucanis thought, as he scurried across the slick roof tiles. The balls of his feet arched inward, searching for traction. "Keep moving," he told himself. Right now, momentum was his only friend. The waiter continued to hasten through the crowd. Lucanis's stomach tensed as disembodied hands stretched from the throng to snatch the remaining glasses. Luckily, no one seemed to notice the tray's stowaway. Up ahead, Lucanis spied the servant's entrance. If he could reach it, there was just enough space to wedge his body into the covered niche above the door. Not easily, of course, but nothing ever was. He increased his speed to a run, trusting the music and general noise from the party to mask his footfalls. His eyes darted left and right. No one had spotted him yet, but if he missed this jump, he'd have everyone's attention. "Don't think about it." Lucanis took a deep breath and flung himself off the roof. Suspended in air, time seemed to slow. The only sound that registered was the gust of wind rushing past his face. The opposite wall moved toward Lucanis with the weight of a warship on the horizon. Then his gloved fingers caught the ledge, and he felt everything at once. A burning pressure shot through the marrow of his bones, and the surrounding muscles screamed as he twisted his torso to keep from slamming into the wall. Casting his momentum backward, then forward again, he swung up into a plank position across the columns framing the servant's entrance. 2 minutes later, the waiter passed below, holding the tray and keyring aloft, ripe for the plucking. Lucanis relieved the man of his burden, then climbed back up to the roof and dashed toward the door Ambrose had disappeared through. Now, the hard part. Lucanis greeted the guard on the other side of the door with a dagger to the throat. He covered his mouth to muffle the gurgling noise, then dragged the body behind one of the curtains, covering the windows. Lucanis thought about securing the entrance. Leaving it unlocked could raise suspicion, but chose not to in case Illario decided to work tonight. He could already hear his cousin's honeyed excuses. "But seducing a beautiful woman is work. He snorted and pushed farther inside. The cold opulence of the place reminded Lucanis of a chantry rather than a home. Atlases bearing the visages of past archons held up vaulted ceilings, glittering with mosaic depictions of Tevinter's golden age. The cost of such a commission must have been astronomical, both in coin and lives. How many slaves had gone blind gilding each individual tile? How many backs had been broken from hauling and placing stone after stone? There was patriotism, and there was obsession. Neither was worth it. The only part of the mansion's interior design Lucanis did appreciate was the abundance of pointed lines and edges, which made scaling walls a cinch. Hopping from one stone archon to the next, he moved down the curved hall. He hadn't seen where Ambrose had gone, but he had a fast rule when hunting Venatori. Follow the headache. Sure enough, at the end of the hall, he spotted 8 guards, Ambrose's retinue. One duo watched the adjoining corridor while another patrolled the center. 2 were posted at the windows, and the last pair flanked an imposing studded door. Lucanis gritted his teeth as the scraping inside his skull intensified. Every instinct in his body told him that Ambrose was behind that door. But first, he had to deal with the guards. The 2 on patrol passed underneath. Both men were solidly built, with scars peeping from their uniform collars. Each carried a sword and a dagger. Reaching into his jacket pocket, Lucanis retrieved a long spool of wire attached to 2 wooden grips. He backtracked along the archon heads and waited for the guards to round the corner. Measuring out a decent length of wire, Lucanis spun the garrote, then whipped it down around the first guard's neck. 1 for silence. The man lurched into the air as Lucanis used his weight as leverage to glide down onto the second guard's shoulders. 2 for surprise. Tucking his ankle underneath his left knee, Lucanis held one man in a stranglehold while the other dangled overhead, his feet kicking wildly. The second guard's fists beat against Lucanis's shins. He elbowed him in response, jerking the suspended guard up and down until his legs went ragdoll slack. The second guard continued to fight, but his strength was fading. Lucanis tightened his grip and twisted until he heard the guard's neck crack.
"Polis, everything all right?"
Wrapping the end of the garrote around the second guard's broken neck, Lucanis somersaulted backward. The dead weight of the first man pulled the second one up until they both hung around the limestone archon's nape like a loose cravat.
"Better check it out,"
another guard said. Their exchange was followed by the sound of tentative footsteps. Lucanis sunk back into the shadows and ascended the column once more. Across his chest, a leather strap held 4 throwing knives. He grabbed 2 in anticipation. The steps grew louder. 8 feet. 4 guards. That left the 2 at the door.
"Polis, we told you. No pranks tonight. Not with the crows circling."
Even without uniforms, the guards could have been related. They all possessed the same hard brow and flat broken nose that hadn't been set correctly.
"Maybe they want for a piss. Ain't no better than to leave their post."
"Spread out." Lucanis mouthed the words as the guards gave the order. They created a wedge formation, with 1 in the lead and 3 taking up the rear. Aiming carefully, Lucanis let loose one of the throwing knives. 3 for good measure. It sliced through his target's spine with clean precision. The guard slumped into his partner's shoulder. He turned.
"What the?"
A squishy thud interrupted him. He glanced down to find a knife in his heart, and joined the other guard on the floor. Force exercise. The formation broke.
"He's here! The crow's here!"
Another pair from Ambrose's retinue rushed around the corner. Flicking his wrists, Lucanis produced a stiletto dagger from each sleeve and dropped down to the reinforcements. The violence of the fall drove the pointed blades into their skulls with ease.
5 for slaughter. 6 for thrill.
The remaining guards stood back to back, staring at him as if he were death itself. Lucanis unsheathed his sword. After a few shaky breaths, they yelled and charged toward him. He parried the first guard's blow, then slid behind the second, and severed his hamstring. 7 means more sovereigns. Twirling back into a standing position, he decapitated the kneeling man with one powerful swing. "Shit!" The last guard stammered, his boot inching backward. "Shit!" He ran. Lucanis went for his throwing knives, when a steel blade whirled past his head to land in the guard's back, dropping him like a stone. 8 marks the final kill, Illario said, coming to stand next to him. He dusted off his palms. "Do you still recite that old nursery rhyme? The one Katarina made us memorize during training?" Lucanis moved to retrieve his throwing knives. "What can I say? It's catchy." "That's a word for it." Illario glanced at the swaying guards overhead. "You know, if the Vins ever learn to look up, you're screwed. They'd have to stop looking down their noses first." He narrowed his eyes. "Your tunic's rumpled." Illario flashed a sheepish grin. "You weren't the only one tussling with guards." "Tussling, huh?" Lucanis shook his head. "That's a word for it. I'm happy to kiss and tell, but shouldn't we do something about this?" Illario wrinkled his nose and nodded toward the sticky fluid seeping out from underneath the slain guards. Lucanis wiped his blade clean and advanced toward the studded door. "Leave it." "What, out in the open?" "You bring 'em up?" Illario glowered at him. "No, but you've half an armory stored in that coat. I thought maybe—" Both men froze. At the end of the hall, an elven woman gaped. She was a collection of bones covered in dry, flaky skin and a shaved head. The chains around her wrists and ankles marked her as one of the Wigmaker's slaves. The linen she had been carrying tumbled to the ground in a heap. Illario cursed. "Bad timing, mia cara." The woman trembled. She was so thin. The grooves in her joints were clearly visible. "Please," she begged. Lucanis arched a brow. Her voice was young. He approached her with leisurely steps. "Please," she repeated, her tone growing panicked. "I didn't. I won't." "Shh," Lucanis murmured. "How old are you?" She blinked, thinking for a moment, then admitted. I don't know." "What about your name?" "Effie." The pores on Effie's scalp were an angry red as if her hair had been torn from her root. "Did he do that?" Lucanis asked, pointing. She instinctively reached up to touch the irritated skin. "I had split ends. Master doesn't like split ends." Lucanis made a fist to quell the rage growing within him. He leaned over to pick up the fallen linens. "Go back the way you came." "She's seen our faces," Illario hissed. Lucanis stared into Effie's wide, wondering eyes. Despite her fear, she didn't look away. "No, she hasn't." He handed her the linens. "Have you?" She shook her head. Lucanis nodded for her to leave. Effie took a couple of steps backward, then bit her lip. "You're the crow, aren't you? The one sent to kill my master?" "I am," Lucanis replied, his tone matter-of-fact. Illario swore under his breath. "Tell her everything, why don't you?" "Have you done it yet?" Effie asked, growing tense. "No." "Will you?" "Yes." She closed her eyes and clasped the linens to her chest. "Good. You want him dead?" Illario asked, puzzled. "Why? Your next master could be worse." Effie pointed toward the studded door, her expression cold. "You'll see." Lucanis flipped through the keys until he found one large enough to match the door's iron lock. "Never known you to have a soft heart," Illario muttered. Lucanis's right cheek must have twitched. "She won't talk." "This isn't Antiva. We're not heroes here." "We're not heroes anywhere, cousin." Illario rolled his eyes. "You know what I mean. The Venatori already have your name. If they learn your face, I'll grow a beard." Lucanis smirked. "They'll never see me coming." Illario's frustration deflated. He grinned reluctantly. "That cavalier attitude's going to get you killed." Lucanis turned the key until the bolt unlatched. "It served me well so far." Securing the grip on his sword, he eased the door open and peeked inside. There was nothing but darkness and stale air. Lucanis gestured for Illario to follow as he slipped through the entryway. They stood for a moment, quiet and still, allowing their eyes to adjust. 10 paces ahead, a stairwell materialized in the shadows. Their descent was slow-going. Wrought iron made for easy creaks and groans. Each step was a test of patience and balance. Lucanis went first, showing Illario where to place his feet. Despite their descent underground, the temperature was rising. At the bottom, an arched entryway emitted a red glow that bled onto knobby cobblestones. The light should have been refreshing in the dark. But Lucanis had visited enough bad places to know he wasn't going to like this room. And he didn't. Row after row, men and women were chained to the ceiling in a tiny formation, their heads lolled forward between straining shoulders. Cascades of hair tumbled past the amputated knees to settle in pools of silver, black, gold, and copper. A shiny, terrible rainbow of hair. Lucanis approached the first row. Up close, he noticed their skin had turned an ash gray and was spotted with crystallized sores. Gently, he pushed the hair from one of their faces. The man's mouth was sewn shut, his eyes milky. He twisted toward Lucanis. All at once, the room had become aware strangers were present. One by one, they moaned a horrifying chorus of despair. Lucanis stumbled back, his mouth dry. Something inside snapped. Death is too good for this bastard. Illario touched his arm. Only then did Lucanis realize how quickly he was breathing. He closed his eyes. "Remember your training," he told himself, and suddenly he could hear the tapping of his grandmother's cane, the hard elegance of her voice. There was no place for emotion in killing. It's sloppy. File it down. Make it useful. Make it useful. He repeated it to himself. With slow, controlled breaths, Lucanis flushed the rage pumping through his veins until he could think clearly. Ambrose would die. That was certain. But he couldn't walk away from these people. He returned to the man's side and reached for the irons around his wrists. "What are you doing?" Illario whispered. "Breaking their shackles." Illario stared. "That's not the job." "Fuck the job." From the back of the chamber, a humming joined the melodies of wails. Lucanis peered into the gloom, but the source was too far to see. He locked eyes with Illario and jerked his thumb toward the sound. Weaving among the pendulous bodies, they crept closer. The moans grew louder. Lucanis did his best to avoid brushing against the clammy limbs, but the prisoners were packed in tight. Finally, through the forest of undulating torsos, he could discern a figure hunched over in the dark. "You're lovely tonight, my lovelies," Ambrose said, taking a pair of shears in hand. On his desk, a collection of gleaming combs, hackles, and needles were meticulously organized in glass containers. "Do you wish to join the party?" Rising on his tiptoes, he unchained one of the prisoners to sit him in the chair next to the workstation. "All in good time," the Wigmaker promised. The prisoner stared ahead, his elongated arms limp and atrophied. Both shoulders jutted forward at a cruel angle, stretching the bruised skin. Lucanis knew from experience that they were dislocated. After donning a set of leather gloves, the Wigmaker opened one of the desk's drawers. The chamber's soft glow became a brilliant vermilion. Lucanis craned his neck to see Ambrose retrieve pebble-sized chunks of red lyrium. Shit. Ambrose resumed his mellow tune. Using a basalt mortar and pestle, he ground the lyrium into a powder. Once he was satisfied with the consistency, he poured the contents into a goblet of wine. Pivoting back toward the prisoner, Ambrose snipped the knot at the corner of his mouth and unlaced the thread binding his lips. His jaw fell open with a raspy wheeze. "Drink up, my dear," the Wigmaker whispered, tipping the prisoner's head back. A grin spread across his face as he watched the man's throat work down the liquid. Lucanis thought he'd forgotten what fear felt like, but its cold embrace was easily recognizable. He remembered the models with their dead eyes, how the wigs seemed to be alive with magic. Red lyrium would explain why the veil was so thin. And yet, he glanced around at the bodies filled with anguish and suffering. This place should be a hotbed for demons. How was Ambrose keeping them at bay? Think, damn it. Lucanis racked his mind. There were rumors of elven artifacts that strengthened the veil and prevented demons from breaking through. Perhaps Ambrose had acquired one. He surveyed the room, searching for something, anything that might provide a barrier against the spirit world. But there was nothing, except for hair, bodies, and the Wigmaker's workstation. Then Illario's words came to mind. "If the Vince ever learn to look up, you're screwed." His gaze lifted. In the center of the chamber, a small cage hung from the ceiling. Inside was a globe, crackling with green energy. Warm satisfaction spread through him. Gotcha. Meanwhile, Ambrose redressed the prisoner's mouth and was fastening his shackles. "I'm afraid the rest of you will have to wait. I don't care what Camille says. I'm not missing the show's finale." He brought a lock of hair to his nose and inhaled deeply. "I've worked too hard." To his right, Lucanis sensed Illario readying his dagger. He gently grabbed his cousin's wrist and shook his head. Illario gawked at him, his jaw clenched. The Wigmaker began the walk toward the stairs. A groaning lament followed as he passed. When he was close enough to touch, Illario tensed, as if to lunge forward. Lucanis tightened his hold, his thumb finding the pressure point at the base of his wrist. The dagger fell from Illario's grasp. Lucanis swiped it up before it clanged to the ground. "What are you doing?" Illario mouthed. Again, Lucanis motioned him to stand down. Once they heard Ambrose climb the stairs and close the door, Illario wrenched his arm free. "Have you lost your mind? We had him!" "He doesn't deserve a quick death." "Did you forget the mess you left upstairs? What do you think will happen when Ambrose finds his bodyguard slaughtered?" "Hopefully, he panics. I want him scared." "He'll flee," Illario asserted. "And this contract will be forfeit. Your life will be forfeit." Ambrose would never leave his creations. Lucanis appraised the brutality that surrounded them. "Don't worry, cousin. He'll die. But in the right way." Illario threw his hands up. "Death is death. There's still time to chase Ambrose down. But we need to leave, now. Magic isn't my forte, but even I know red lyrium is bad news. It infects people's minds, Lucanis." Illario pressed. "We can't help these people." Lucanis looked up at the caged globe. "No, but we can give them vengeance." After placing Illario's dagger between his teeth, Lucanis jumped high to seize the bottom rungs of the cage. The chain swiveled from the added weight, but held strong. He pulled himself up. There was just enough space between the bars to reach inside. "What are you doing?" Illario called out. Lucanis took the dagger from his mouth and positioned it over the artifact. "You'll see." Illario groaned. "I really wish people would stop saying that." Breathing deep, Lucanis plunged the dagger into the globe. The strength of the stone ricocheted up through the joints of his arm. He watched the green light sputter and fizzle. There was a moment of silence. Then madness. "Seriously, what did you do?" Illario yelled, as they raced up the stairs, a cacophony of twisting bones and snapping shackles at their heels. "That globe was keeping the veil intact," Lucanis explained, taking 2 steps at a time. So you stabbed it? You said yourself, vengeance was the best I could offer. No, Illario retorted, his breath heavy from exertion. My exact words were, we can't help these people. I said nothing of vengeance. You're the vengeancey one. They neared the top of the stairs. Lucanis used the railing to propel himself forward. Trust me, to Ambrose, turning his creations against him is a fate worse than death. I'm sorry, did the contract ask for a fate worse than death? Usually it's just death. Illario! But the other crow wasn't finished. I thought the plan was to have a few laughs, slit some throats, not release a demon swarm. Plans change, Lucanis replied. His gloved palm covered the door handle. Well, for the record, I prefer the other one. Noted. He went to yank the door open, then hesitated. Do you hear that? Illario's legs bounced impatiently. The demons? Yes, I hear them. Lucanis shook his head. There's no alarm. Ambrose should have found the bodies by now. Illario tilted his head, then shrugged. Don't question the Maker's miracles, cousin. Lucanis moved his ear closer to the door's studded surface. Swirling water, soap suds bubbled and popped. A loud slap echoed as drenched fabric hit marble. A mop? He opened the door. The hall was empty. Lucanis tossed Illario his dagger, then readied his own. Cautiously they ventured forth. With tense muscles, they rounded the corner. The guards' corpses were gone. In their place, they found Effie cleaning the floor. When she saw Lucanis, her knuckles turned white. You said you'd kill him! Lucanis motioned Illario to lower his weapon. It's all right. It's not. Her voice quavered. Master just passed this way. If he finds out I helped you, he'll... He won't, Lucanis promised. Where are the bodies? Illario asked. Effie shrank into herself. I moved them. Not by yourself, you didn't. He turned to Lucanis, a smug sneer on his face. I told you she'd talk. Only to the other slaves. Please, she pleaded to Lucanis. I didn't tell them what you looked like, only that you're here. They wanted to help. She squared her slight shoulders. You promised to kill him. And you promised to keep your mouth shut, Illario chided. Back down the hall, something wet slammed against the studded door. Effie's bravado crumbled. What was that? Take her, Lucanis told Illario. Find the others. Other what? His eyes darted to the elf. Slaves? Absolutely not. Behind them, a second fleshy thud echoed, then a third, and a fourth. Lucanis continued as if Illario had agreed. There is a statue with a passage. Like the one we used before, it's not far. You should be able to escape the chaos. Illario blanched. Did you not hear me? I said... Atima will help you. She's the elf woman we met earlier. I don't give a damn what her name is. I'm not... Once Ambrose is dealt with, I'll meet you by the docks. Lucanis! Illario shouted. We are not revolutionaries! Lucanis inhaled, his nostrils flaring. Illario was right. The Antivan Crows were assassins, not freedom fighters. Back home, people liked to romanticize. But Lucanis knew what he was. Still, his fingers twitched. They are not responsible for their master's mistake. He locked eyes with his cousin. Illario tried to remain resolute, but it was like touching hot steel. Sighing, he cursed and turned toward Effie. Come on, Illario snapped. She glanced toward Lucanis. He gave her a reassuring nod. My cousin may be a snob, but he's true to his word. Are you? She asked, referring to his promise about Ambrose. The Wigmaker will die tonight, Lucanis affirmed. But you have to go. It's about to become very dangerous. As if to prove his point, someone outside screamed. The scene in the courtyard had changed dramatically, But if Lucanis was being honest, he preferred chaos to debauchery. It gave him satisfaction to watch drunken Vince trip over themselves, desperate to find an exit. Wine and blue blood spilled in equal measure as guests careened through an obstacle course of upturned chase lounges and broken glass. The demons had possessed the models first, the red lyrium-imbued wigs an enticing lure, their bony bodies stretching into towering masses of contorted flesh. The transformation affected the wigs, too, giving the locks a serrated edge. Strands stuck out at odd angles, whipping wildly, cutting anyone who drew too close. For mages, fear was an open invitation to demonic possession, and the alcohol the guests had consumed had dulled their defenses. One after another, the drunkest and most frightened among them fell prey to malicious spirits watching, waiting, on the other side of the veil. Lucanis felt no sympathy. They were, all of them, Venatori supporters, who either knew what Ambrose was doing or chose to turn a blind eye to indulge their own vanity. Ignorance is bliss, not innocence. He spotted Ambrose Forfax at the center of the carnage, surrounded by a gleaming pile of hair. The Wigmaker was shouting at Camille to cut his wigs off the abominations. Her painted arms were getting sliced to ribbons for her efforts. Growing impatient, Ambrose snarled, "Get out of the way!" He shoved the guard captain. Her ankle, unaccustomed to heels, twisted and snapped. Camille fell forward, toward one of the abominations. An errant lock of hair caught her throat. The gash was thin, but deep. With frantic fingers she tried to apply pressure. She looked to Ambrose and extended a pleading hand. The mage rolled his eyes. Useless. Ambrose grabbed her wrist and pulled the pressure off her neck, allowing the blood to flow freely. This, however... The guard captain collapsed at his feet. Employing Camille's blood as a catalyst, the Wigmaker impaled the abomination with spikes of crimson energy. The monstrous corpse exploded when it hit the ground, but Ambrose had enough foresight to create a barrier, shielding himself from the gore. The Wigmaker leaned over to lift a stringy tangle of hair from the grisly pile. Lucanis dropped onto the runway, his sword arm limber with anticipation. He stalked toward Ambrose. "Nothing a little soap can't fix," he offered. Ambrose threw down the matted mess. "Lucanis Dellamorte, I presume." "Si," Lucanis answered, knowing even a single syllable of a foreign language would disgust the Wigmaker. It had the desired effect. Ambrose recoiled as if he'd stepped in urine. "Is this your handiwork?" "Si." The mage's jaw pulsed. "You think you can come into my Imperium and act as judge and executioner?" Lucanis opened his mouth to respond, but Ambrose anticipated his answer. "Don't say si." That earned a genuine smile from Lucanis. "Normally, there is no judgment, only a contract. But for you, Ambrose, I made an exception." The Wigmaker raised a brow. "Oh, what makes me so special?" "You upset my delicate sensibilities." It was Ambrose's turn to laugh. "I thought a crow could stomach anything, for the right price." Lucanis leveled the Wigmaker with a pointed look. "Not red lyrium." "Morality is not static. Right and wrong are a matter of perspective." Ambrose's words were practiced and tired, as if he'd given the same reasoning 100 times. Lucanis continued his advance, refusing to engage in the Wigmaker's rhetoric. Nothing irritated him more than self-righteous excuses. If you're going to do something terrible, just own it. The abominations from the workshop had joined the party. One of them seized a fleeing guard. He screamed as it wrapped him in a cocoon of razor-sharp hair. Blood oozed from the coiled strands. Ambrose shot a quick glance at Camille's corpse. The gesture lasted only a split second, but it was enough to prompt Lucanis to increase his pace. Close the distance. Don't let him get a spell off. Chanting under his breath, the Wigmaker began summoning a bloody mist from the guard captain's remains. The lifeless skin paled and shriveled. Lucanis broke into a run. The mist sharpened into 1,000 tiny needles. Ambrose raised his arm. "Not going to make it," Lucanis thought, snatching a knife from his coat. The needles vibrated eagerly. Just as the Wigmaker launched them forward, Lucanis threw his knife, taking off 4 of Ambrose's fingers. Without a mage to guide them, the needles transformed back into globules of blood and rained down on the catwalk. Ambrose, clutching his ruined hand, crumbled to his knees. "You should be more careful," Lucanis said. "Fingers are a Wigmaker's tools, are they not?" Hopelessness filled the mage's eyes. "One day, someone will turn your work against you. Only then will you have some semblance of the emptiness you've made me feel." With his good hand, he gathered what was left of the wigs, hugging the locks to his chest. Lucanis experienced a twinge of disappointment, kindling for rage. He expected more fight from a high-ranking Venatori. He thought of the Wigmaker's workshop, of the prisoners, their bellies full of poison, hanging like butchered pigs in stale, suffocating darkness. "Get up, Ambrose," he growled. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to quit." The word quit sparked some life in the Wigmaker's blink expression. "So the crow thinks he can best the dragon." "The crow," Lucanis mocked, "knows it." A cackle, distorted and unhinged, erupted from Ambrose's lips. The hair in his fist glowed, and Lucanis swore he heard the strands whisper. "I'll make you eat those words," Ambrose promised, his voice no longer his own. Lucanis watched, repulsed, as the Wigmaker began shoving locks of hair into his mouth. The sharp edges shredded his tongue and gums, but he continued stuffing, chewing and eating until the bottom half of his face was ground meat. That's one way to make a point, Lucanis thought, coming to a stop. Gnarled cords of muscle ripped the seams of the Wigmaker's clothing. Cartilage tore, vertebrae popped. Ambrose held his pulsing, distended scalp, strands of hair cutting through the skin, lashing out like a sea monster. Lucanis had seen many abominations, but never one like this. It was almost arachnid in shape, with 8 segments of spiky hair forming the legs, and Ambrose's twisted, mutated body making up the abdomen. "Thought you said you were the dragon, not spider," Lucanis taunted, hoping to distract the beast while he searched for a route to higher ground. In response, the creature rose to its full height, then slashed at the crow with its serrated limbs. Lucanis dove sideways, mere seconds before the monster's front legs pierced, then ran away. "This is why you don't talk during a fight," Lucanis scolded himself. Zigging and zagging to avoid the spiked appendages, he sped toward the arched columns. He ducked under another abomination's swiping claws and inhaled a chestful of air before scrambling up the first column, then the second. His fingers had just grazed the final ledge when a searing pain shot through his right shoulder. Lucanis tried to pull away, but he could feel the hair wrap around his clavicle, yanking him back from the inside. He lost his grip. The abomination hurled Lucanis skyward. More legs perforated his hip, bicep, thigh. Steeling himself against the pain, Lucanis flipped backward and severed the hairy limbs. He heard an inhuman shriek, and then he was falling. Lucanis hit the roof with a smack, powerful enough to fracture the clay tiles and 2 of his ribs. "Make that 3, he noted, rolling onto his back. Below, the abomination let out a high-pitched wail. Lucanis gritted his teeth and forced himself to peer over the side. With 4 of its legs now too short to support its body, the creature struggled to stand. Sensing its weakness and spurred on by the demons of vengeance within, the other abominations began to surround it. "That's it." Lucanis smiled encouragingly. "Good little demons." Turning his sword over in his palm, he cut across the rooftop. The smaller abominations pushed the larger beast into a corner. The creature reared back to swipe the encroaching swarm, exposing Ambrose's distorted frame. One of the slashed legs constricted around an attacking abomination. Ambrose's mouth opened wide, unhooking its maimed jaw to swallow the abomination whole. The legs began to grow back before Lucanis's eyes.
"No, you don't!"
he shouted. Raising his sword overhead, Lucanis leapt off the roof. He could hear the clamoring horde below, but he kept his focus on the creature's underbelly. Too late, it tried to protect itself. Hundreds of wiry strands whipped through the air, catching only the wind. Lucanis plunged his sword into Ambrose's mangled sternum. He dragged the blade down in one long, clean cut until he ran out of flesh. For a moment, the abomination wobbled. The fissure in its core festered with inky spume. Then, slowly, the vicious halves split, folding outward. A putrid vapor infected the atmosphere. The locks of hair composing the creature's legs disjoined and frizzled with static. Panting heavily, Lucanis regarded the creature's collapse without joy or anger. A vermilion fire engulfed the carcass, leaving nothing but a brittle husk. The other abominations stirred.
"You have your vengeance,"
Lucanis rasped, but his words did not reach them. They stared, snarling and ready. He squeezed the grip of his sword, preparing for another fight. Then the pressure behind his skull eased. Without the Wigmaker, the demons had no anchor in the waking world. Gradually, the abominations disintegrated into ash. With the source of their anger gone, the spirits of vengeance returned to the Fade, allowing the dead to rest. Only then did Lucanis exhale and let relief wash over him.
"Contract complete."
Lucanis reached the docks just before dawn. Knowing Illario as he did, he passed their ship's allotted berth to check the nearby taverns. After a quick glance up and down at the harbor, Lucanis settled on the Nug Queen, purely because it was the cleanest establishment of the lot. When he entered, limping and bloody, the barkeep glowered. "Walk out the way you came in," the dwarf instructed. He had a tawny mustache that was twirled and waxed at both ends.
"I'm looking for my cousin,"
Lucanis explained. "Don't care," the dwarf replied. "I know trouble when I see it, even if it's not bleeding on my floorboards." Lucanis scanned the room for Illario. The barkeep's attitude aside, the tavern was inviting with its pristine white walls and peacock-blue cushions. A brass nug wearing a little crown reigned over the bar's sparse patrons. Most had turned in for the night, but a few sleepy, sullen customers remained, staring into their pints for answers or comfort. Not seeing his cousin among them, Lucanis prepared to leave. Then he heard Illario's silvery voice flattering one of the waiters. "Oi!" the dwarf called out, as Lucanis staggered toward the row of booths lining the left side of the tavern. "Exits this way!" His bellowing drew Illario's attention away from the handsome servant. Upon seeing Lucanis, he jumped to his feet.
"Andraste's holy cabbage! You look like shit!" "Get that man to stop yelling at me,"
Lucanis said. He plopped down in the booth, taking a moment to rest his eyes, while Illario soothed the irate proprietor. "Drink?" his cousin offered, returning with 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. "It's expensive." Lucanis accepted, with a faint nod.
"Some say a bribe spoils the vintage,"
Illario mused while pouring.
"But I think it tastes all the sweeter."
"Ife and the others. Did you get them too?"
Yes,
Illario snapped.
"I did my good deed for the year."
The two paused to sip their wine. Lucanis rolled the liquid over his tongue. Bribery had not spoiled this bottle, at least. "Camille did not make it," he said finally.
"Who?"
"The guard captain."
"Ah,"
Illario said, nodding in recognition.
"Well, that does free me from promises I didn't intend to keep. And Ambrose?"
"You'll have to ask."
"Fair enough. That is,
He gestured toward the dark stains on Lucanis's coat. Mostly. His cousin's brows drew together. Do you need a healer? The ship will have one, but if you can't wait... I'm fine, Lucanis stated. All right, Illario said, topping off his glass. We'll just pretend that's wine you're dripping all over the table. What do you want me to say? Illario's gaze grew hard. How long are you going to keep doing this? Doing what? Katarina's bidding! The wine turned in Lucanis's mouth. Illario, stop. If I was in charge, you wouldn't have to do this anymore, he cajoled. You could quit. Lucanis stared at his cousin. I don't want to quit. Illario sat back. The distance between them suddenly felt much wider than a table. Even if it kills you, Illario whispered. Death is my calling, Lucanis stated, matter of fact, just as yours is to become First Talon. He smiled, hoping to ease the tension, but Illario's posture remained taut. And if Katarina disagrees? If she thinks you're the better man for the job? I don't want it, Illario, Lucanis insisted. But you wouldn't refuse. It's impossible to refuse Katarina, Lucanis admitted reluctantly. Only prolong her, until she sees a reason. He knew it wasn't the answer Illario wanted, but it was the truth. And in their line of work, honesty was hard to come by. Illario exhaled, and lifted his wineglass in salute. To reason, then. To reason, Lucanis echoed. The two crows clinked the rims of their glasses together, then prepared for the long journey home. Master Zara Renata stood nude before the gilded full-length mirror. Every morning she assessed her body, starting with the toes, then working her way up to her face. 3 slaves, each bearing a smaller-looking glass, stood on either side and at her back, so there were no blind spots. They stared unblinking at her lustrous bronze skin. Looking at anything other than their mistress risked a punishment most severe. There was a knock at the door. Normally, Zara would not tolerate an interruption during her morning regimen, but she had been looking forward to this particular visit. Enter, she instructed, glancing over her shoulder to admire the curve of her lower back. Crispin Cavler and Felicia Aramond, mistress, a perfumed beauty announced. No one in Zara's household looked a day over 35. The 2 guests undoubtedly noticed their host's nakedness, but kept their expressions neutral. I take it Ambrose didn't listen, Zara began without ceremony. We advised him to cancel the show, Crispin replied. He refused. Artists, Zara bemoaned, always prioritizing their work over what really matters. Turning in the light, she noticed a faint stretch mark on her hip. Zara snapped at one of her slaves to extend her arm. She did so without hesitation. Reaching back, Zara removed a pointed hairpin from the bountiful bun at her neck. She handed it to the slave, who dutifully pierced her palm with the sharp tip. Squeezing her hand shut, the slave dripped blood onto her mistress's hip. Zara murmured a quick spell. When the slave wiped her skin clean, the offending blemish was gone. How many dead? She asked. The body count is ongoing. A simple estimate, please. Around 40, including Ambrose. Zara's brows rose. My, all the work of one crow. We believe he had assistance, but yes, Felicia nodded gravely. Lucanis Dellamorte is responsible. Crispin licked his lips. We won't be able to keep this away from the public. He and Felicia exchanged a nervous glance. They're already calling him the demon. From a flying vermin to a malicious spirit. That's quite the promotion. With a ribbon, Zara measured the width of her waist. The corner of her mouth ticked upward at the result. We have reason to believe you could be his next target. Your place in the magisterium puts you at risk, Crispin elaborated. His tone rushed.
Worried for me, Crispin?
Zara asked. The younger man reddened, but she noticed he didn't deny it.
Don't me. I'm not a fool like Ambrose. A true Maleficant knows demons cannot be killed, only controlled. If this crow fancies himself a demon, then I look forward to using him to his full potential.
How? Crispin asked.
Never underestimate the power of observation, Zara lectured. I'll keep a low profile. That should entice him to move on to more exciting prey. But he'll continue to kill Venatori, Felicia pointed out. For which he'll be duly punished. But in the meantime, we practice patience.
Zara paused to marvel at herself. Every feature and proportion were in perfect symmetry. And yet, when she smiled, there was something ugly behind it.
Freeing Ambrose's slaves already tells us this crow has a heart. He will reveal other flaws, and we will exploit every last one of them.
This has been Dragon Age, Tevinter Nights, The Wigmaker Job, written by Courtney Woods, and read by Kyle Bond. Thank you for your patience in waiting for this release. It's always a pleasure to do this work, and I hope you enjoyed. Farewell, until the next one.